South Africans will find out today how much more they will pay for electricity. The National Energy Regulator is expected to announce whether it has approved Eskom's application to increase the electricity tariff by 32%. The power utility trying to recover billions of rand for operational costs. Now, NERSA was expected to announce its decision last month, but it said it needed more time to finalize its recommendation. Well, joining us for this discussion is OUTA's CEO, Wayne Duvenage, and included in this discussion is energy expert Adil Nchabeleng. Gentlemen, to both of you, thank you very much for your time. And let's kick it off, starting with you, Mr. Nchabeleng. The SACP has been talking on this matter, and they are, by the way, I don't need to remind you of this, they are part of what is called the Governing Alliance, and they are instructing government, saying that Treasury has to find the money to ensure that Eskom is sufficiently capitalized, because otherwise it will be left to private interests that will make it even less affordable for those who are poor in this country. Where do you stand on that argument?
Well, I totally agree that Eskom is undercapitalized, and worst of all, the model that was supposed to have been followed was where power stations should have been built off balance sheet, as used to be practiced in the past. You know, before 1994, most power stations were built as capital build projects rather than actually depending on tariff to pay off power stations. So that model has to be returned back. It was done perfectly. That's how we have the power stations we have today.
Wayne Duvenage, let me continue with the theme of the SACP saying this to a government that they co-run with the ANC. How or what are South Africans supposed to think of this? Because things have come to a head. NERSA has got to make a decision here. Whether or not the SACP is dissatisfied, that will be perhaps, what do they say? It's a discussion. What kind of discussion is it? The word escapes me now, but it's an academic exercise, rather.
Yes. Yeah, look, I think when you look at the past increases over the last 12 years since Medupi and Kusile were starting to be built, and I agree with Adil that the mechanisms, the accounting mechanisms for how we go about infrastructure development of this nature has really put us under a lot of pressure. So the increases in energy has gone through the roof, and this is something that has to be capitalized now in government's books, because if you don't, then it becomes a situation where price increases are too high, and you chase away not only you put society, civil society, individuals under massive pressure who just cannot afford these increases, but secondly, you chase away investment. People want to manufacture here, they want to do business in this country, and if the energy costs are too high, they're not going to do that here. And other costs, obviously, and other factors and political factors. So we really hope that this time around there is some pressure being brought to bear by NERSA. We found them wanting very often when it comes to the way they interpret some of these things, which is why they keep losing in court. And we can't have that. We need a national energy regulator that is applying its mind properly. And I guess they're trying to do that with all these extensions that have happened. And hopefully they've got it right so that we can not see these massive increases this year. We just cannot afford it.
Yeah. Mr. Nchabeleng, let's come back to you. We need to be practical here. The situation that faces the country, we are on a continuous stage 6 load shedding as we speak. That is not a situation where anyone, including the very government officials, by the way, that we are angry at, all of us, we have to be practical about things, and that is that Eskom is falling apart. It needs this money. What policy choices are still open to government?
With regards to what currently is available to government is a total overhaul of how they've actually been looking at electricity and the whole aspect of managing Eskom. One is it's highly underdeveloped with regards to building up of new power stations, bringing in new energy into the grid, ensuring that you can integrate with the current IPPs properly, You can create new opportunities in the market. So the entire business model from a policy point of view, it's tipsy-turvy right now. And nobody really understands. You have the most, people who are hard-headed with regards to inputs. South Africans are not, silly in that sense where policymakers ignore their inputs. You have a lot of highly knowledgeable people in the country that have given up input into what should be done. But you hardly see all of those inputs coming into play. And most of this advice has been for free, by the way. Government was never in the history of this country where inputs on what should be done and how it could be done better be given so much and none of it utilized. So on the policy side of it, there's a total, complete collapse and failure. We need an overhaul. We need to look at the aspect of how we can start integrating this whole thing and then start moving from this aspect of thinking that there will be, the last resort will be government. For the poor and the marginalized, yes, government is the alternative. But for people that can start doing their own independent thing, we have to relook at how electricity is actually created, priced, as well as distributed. And looking at the aspect of the role of municipality, because most of the cost actually gets literally inflated when it comes to the reselling to the end consumer through the distribution of municipalities and their processes of reselling process and all of that. So there is a lot that can be done. The most important thing right now we have always maintained is bring back the current generation into power so that you move away from load shedding. Plan new power builds of all forms. Bring in all alternative technologies, whether it is nuclear, whether it is to do with coal, whether it's to do with renewables. Bring all resources available. Storage is going to be key, and storage for residential is going to be playing a very vital, important role, residential and commercial. Bring all of that. Heavy industries, you can't do any of the current new technologies. You have to be dependent on a main grid base load energy. So these are things that are not done at a policy level. And, they make policy become this mystical object where if it is not in policy, it mustn't be implemented. Whereas we have an environment whereby we should be doing projects. Government should say, listen, we're implementing this project and not even complicate it. Don't talk programs and all of that ridiculous language government speaks. Just get into things that are doable.
Yeah.
Build and build and build, maintain, refurbish, and then increase the capacity of the grid and restore what has been lost. Then you will have a functional economy and a country in South Africa. These things are done within 18 months. 6 months on a basis where you do a measurement. I'm starting a project now. In 6 months, I want to see return. In 12 months, I want to see aspect of its implementation. In 18 months, I want to see its viability on the return of investment. That's the mindset that we need right now within the policy framework.
Wayne Duvenage, let's conclude the conversation with you. You run an organization whose explicit goal is to undo tax abuse. That's the name of your organization, Undoing Tax Abuse. How is this fair on a consumer who is now going to be saddled with lots and lots of electricity costs if this 32% is indeed granted? And how is it fair on businesses who are also complaining that we're not getting our money's worth?
Exactly. It isn't fair, which is why we make submissions every year to the multi-year price determinations. We put it to government and NERSA that, and unfortunately the history where we were complaining about these massive primary energy increases and the poor management of Eskom, its productivity dropped by 50% over a decade because it put out not one additional kilowatt hour of energy, and it increased its staff by 50%. This is not how you run an organization, and NERSA didn't see its role as holding Eskom to account on some of those matters and the corruption that was happening. So we can't afford it, and it's important for organizations like ourselves and many others to put NERSA under pressure to do its role properly. It needs to protect citizens from this abuse that has taken place for so long now. Now we're in a hole. You can't undo that mess, but what do we do going forward? And I think Adil is right. We need to have a mindset shift that gets into gear now and fixes this problem. There's so many delays and stalling. It's mind-blowing. We are going to make this country uncompetitive. Already we are if we carry on with increases of this nature.
Wayne Duvenage, CEO of OUTA, and Adil Nchabeleng. He is an energy expert. Thank you both for your contribution to this conversation.